Welcome to this episode of the Sports Detective Podcast Show. My name is James Williams, and today we are talking about the Oklahoma Sooners football team, and I am joined by Jay Smith, who is the co-host of the Locked On Sooners podcast. And Jay, we did not plan on doing this podcast starting off about this first question I'm going to ask you, but last night I checked Twitter, and John Mateer is trending. There is screenshots of his Venmo transactions that are talking about him, potentially, giving money to a friend for potential sports gambling. And he ended up addressing it today online, basically saying, hey, that's kind of taken out of context. It's just an inside joke. Like, don't worry about it. Nothing to see here. Just kind of tell me what is going on with this situation, because like, are we going to get to a point where maybe he's suspended? Is this something where the NCAA is going to get involved? Just kind of fill us in with all the details of it so far.
Yeah, James, thanks for having me on. No, with the John Mateer situation, it was Venmo transactions from 2022. And remember, when it comes to Venmo, you can have some of your transactions show publicly. And so you have like whatever little captions and stuff on there or whatnot. And the captions on there, kids put stupid stuff on there because it's like the trend, and it was the trendy thing to do at the time when Venmo was really popping 3 years ago. And so Mateer felt the need to put a whole bunch of he put the word sports gambling in there. And yes, he was a true freshman at Washington State when this was sent. This was sent in like November of 2022. And I'm gonna keep it a buck. 18-year-olds put stupid stuff in there. Like, he had some other stuff that was actually worse.
Yeah,
that I feel like
sophomore
probably
humor
could have been a lot more scrutinized for. But
yeah.
18-year-old put dumb stuff in there. That's just what they do. And so because of that, what I heard, the rumor I heard was it was either a Michigan fan or a Texas fan that got, I guess, bored and decided to go search Venmo and see if they could find anything. And come to find out, he was putting all kinds of stuff in there, and there were transactions to his teammate. So it made it look like, oh, I think he was gambling on games, when in all actuality, it was him putting a stupid caption in with a friend based on, heck, he was probably paying for pizza or something. But I don't think that there's going to be anything there. The NCAA hasn't said anything about an investigation. Oklahoma put out a statement. John Mateer put out a statement. So keep it in the buck. I don't think anything is going to be serious. I don't even think it's going to even come up after this week.
Yeah, well, it's kind of one of those things where it's just we got to wait and see. It feels like you'd have to have the gambling companies get involved. I don't even know if could you even legally gamble in Washington? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. Who knows? But it's just gonna be something that we're gonna have to sit and wait. And hopefully for Oklahoma fans and for this entire team that this kind of just dissolves and goes away in the next few days. But definitely something that we're going to keep our eye on heading towards the season. I do want to talk about this football team heading into this year, though. So we got Brent Venables, head coach at Oklahoma, entering his fourth year. The first year, he's taken over a team that you basically had to put everything back together. You had to start from scratch because Lincoln Riley leaves, takes a whole bunch of guys with him. The second year, things look really great. 10-2 season. Dylan Gabriel is putting up, big time numbers. Then Dylan Gabriel leaves. Jeff Levy does such a good job with the offense. He gets to go to be Mississippi State's head coach. Last year was not a very good year, specifically on the offensive side of the ball. Oklahoma is a school, too, that if you just go and look at their history over the last 70 years, they are one of the most consistent college football programs that we have outside of a few years in the 90s. This team is always in the mix competing for national championships. Brent Venables this season, he's got to have a lot of pressure heading into this year to perform and to win a lot of games, or at least be competing for a playoff spot. Am I right?
Yeah, the way that this roster is set, this the one good thing for Oklahoma is, in the Brent Venables era, the big issue truly was that, like you said, when he came in, there was a lot of turnover for the most part in a lot of key positions. You lose your quarterback, some wide receivers, running back. You had a few pieces that kind of left out. And so you had to kind of, augment from there. And to me, if there was one sin I will say that Brent Venables committed coming into Oklahoma was he didn't clean house day one. He decided to be a I'm gonna give people a chance. I'm gonna give these players a chance and we'll see what happens from there. And truth be told, you probably should have cleaned house year one because that's kind of how things happened. Was year one things were kind of bad. Year two, you saw the bounce back, which was awesome. Jeff Levy gets a head coaching job in Mississippi State, so you lose your offensive coordinator. And that year, you also lost a bunch of veteran offensive linemen, mainly because a lot of them decided to transfer out. They realized that the younger players were probably going to play more than them, so they bounced. So you're playing with a bunch of true freshmen, redshirt freshmen, and true sophomores, basically guys within their first 2 years on your offensive line, and you're trying to figure that out. Plus, you got a redshirt freshman quarterback. And to me, when I did my preview on that, I told everybody the defense is going to have to carry this team because the offense is going to be still trying to figure things out. But the saving grace for the quarterback at the time, Jackson Arnold, is he's got veteran wide receivers and running backs to kind of help get through it. That didn't happen very long because by the end of the season, 6 wide receivers were down. 4 were down in the first 4 games of the season. So he's basically starting from scratch too. And so because of all of that, you saw the bad year last year. Well, the good thing for Oklahoma is coming in this year, they're ranked number 10 in the country in returning production from Bill Conley's statistics over at ESPN. So number 8 in the country in offensive returning production, and what's that, 30 on defense. So 63% of the defense is back, 77% of the offense is back, 70% in total on the team is back in returning production. Again, it's number 10 in the country. They're bringing back vast majority of the roster on a defense that was ranked top 10 last year. So if your defense stays intact and now you bring in a quarterback like John Mateer, which we talked about, you bring in a running back like Jaden Ott, who's rushed for 2,500 yards in his first 3 years, and you kind of you rebuild your wide receiver room, and your offensive line has shown that when healthy, they can survive the SEC. This sets them up perfectly to finish within the top 12 in the country and make it to the playoffs.
I'm glad that you brought up the injuries there with the wide receiver room, because that was something, if you weren't really following Oklahoma that closely and you were kind of just looking at them from afar, kind of like, what the heck is up with their offense? Like why are they keep struggling, and what the heck's going on there? I think a big reason why was because they just were not healthy, and you're playing a bunch of unproven guys, and you brought up some of the offensive line stuff there. But this year, the plan to fix the offense is like what you said. They talked about John Mateer and Jaden Ott and some of their statistical production that they had at California and Washington State over their careers. But he also brought in Ben Arbuckle, 29 years old, offensive coordinator. I'm 29 years old. I can't imagine being an offensive coordinator in the SEC. So this guy has got to be an incredibly impressive a coach to be getting this position at such a young age. If you look at some of his previous offenses, Western Kentucky, Washington State, it seems like he's coaching to really air the ball out. But like you said, this is a wide receiver room that is rebuilding. And you got Jaden Ott for a reason. You got John Mateer, who had a bunch of rushing yards and rushing touchdowns last year. Are we going to be seeing a more run-heavy offense, or is this going to be something where it's like, hey, we're airing it out?
It'll probably be a mixture. Ben Arbuckle runs kind of a air raid type West Texas offense. So honestly, the other people you remember from West Texas that run an offense similar would be a Cliff Kingsbury, a Lincoln Riley, So Mike Leach. So the coaches that have come from those trees or whatnot, he was over at Western Kentucky, and Bailey Zappi was his quarterback, and the dude set the record for most passing yards in the season. So you would expect for it to be constant airing it out. When in all actuality, you'll see a mixture of pass and run with this offense. John Mateer is a running quarterback as well. He is a dual threat. He rushed for over 800 yards last year to go with his 3,100 yards passing and 44 touchdowns. So he does it everywhere, in the air, on the ground. He's all over the place. And then adding Jaden Ott to this running back room, you're probably going to see a lot of physicality. They're going to be pushing people around. They're going to be trying to impose their will on every team they play. That way the running backs can just run upfield and be gone. So that's the expectations, really. It's going to be a mixture in there just because that's just how we know Ben Arbuckle kind of plays. He did that kind of Washington State. It was a mix. So I don't expect it to be just full airing out, but I sense there's going to be a lot of creativity with the way the offense is ran. So you'll see some mixes, you'll see some good crossing routes, you'll see some good movement from the wide receivers, so they're not standing in place, but they'll create and be able to do things in space. If anything, I expect the ball to get out quickly so the playmakers can be playmakers and do their thing. So pretty excited about seeing what this is going to look like this season. So, but I think Ben Arbuckle was a fantastic pickup. The best part about that is that he brought in his quarterback with him. So the adjustment's going to be a lot easier for Oklahoma because you don't have a quarterback trying to figure it out like a Michael Hawkins, who's the backup, is, and all the others behind him. The quarterback's teaching everybody else on the team what to do and how things work. So they can continuously add more and more wrinkles throughout camp and throughout the season to where teams still have to keep guessing because the quarterback knows exactly what needs to be done, and the skills positions are just trying to figure it out.
So the weaknesses of this team last year were, as some of the stuff that we brought up already, offensive line issues, wide receiver issues, and I'm just looking through the preview packets that I have for Oklahoma this year, and still the two biggest question marks are the wide receivers, are the offensive line. Can you convince me that these aren't going to be as big of an issue as they were last year, or is that something that we just kind of have to wait and see?
The questions behind the offensive line was specifically because of how healthy they were. Same thing with wide receiver. With the wide receiver room, all the ones that were quote unquote injured, they're not on the team anymore. You've got a whole new wide receiver room for the most part with a bunch of young players that played last year. So you've got some players that gained some experience, which is a good thing. And in the offensive line, it's similar. You dealt with a lot of players that were injured, but a lot of them actually came back and they're healthy. So that's a big difference maker to me that you would see out of this offensive line is when you watch the Auburn game, the Alabama game, when you watch the Missouri game, as well as the LSU game, honestly, the first half of the Ole Miss game as well, that's when Oklahoma was healthy. That's when the offensive line had the starting five you wanted to play, and you would notice that they were moving furniture. Like, Bama was struggling trying to get pressure on runners. Heck, Oklahoma was literally a running team in that game, and they still could not stop them. Similar in the Auburn game, it was a mixture of pass and run, and the defense showed up, but there was a bunch of the offensive line was trying to get itself intact and gel and get chemistry, and they figured it out. So when you see the line healthy, those games are the way they look when they're healthy. Now, granted, Ole Miss, you lost your left tackle, actually lost two of your tackles at the half, and that's when they were able to go through and get 9 sacks by the end of the game because people get hurt. Can't do anything when you have a whole bunch of injured offensive linemen. And so, and you're putting in freshmen again to try to figure things out at a young age. So for this line, it's going to be a lot stronger, specifically because they're a lot healthier in comparison to what they were last year. Plus, you added a few extra players to mix in. You brought in one player, a Derek Simmons, who was very coveted on the offensive line. You add him. You bring in 5-star Michael Fasusi, who looks like he's built to play in the SEC today. Same thing with 4-star Ryan Fauché, who is already the size of an SEC guard. He's probably going to play as well. And then some of the freshmen from last year that didn't get a full year of camp, like a Eddie Pierre-Louis, a Heath Ozida, they're going to actually see more games. So the good thing is that you got a lot of people ready. You got a lot of people that should be able to play on this offensive line. And in the wide receiver room, you just went to the portal and pulled as many dudes as you can get your hands on, plus the ones you currently have. I expect them to be a pleasant surprise this season in comparison to last year.
Okay. So if you look at when Brent Venables took over, a big thing that Lincoln Riley did not necessarily do a good job at his time at Oklahoma, and it's also kind of the reason he's struggled at times while he's been at USC, is he hasn't been getting the trenches right. He hasn't been getting a lot of big boys. I think a thing that Oklahoma really stressed heading into year 2 of Brent Venables was like, hey, we just need to get a bunch of dudes that are over 300 pounds because we were not left with that much, big boys in the trenches. How has that progressed in Brent Venables' 4 years at Oklahoma, just rebuilding, not just the offensive line, but also the defensive line?
So if you listen to some of the national guys like a Phil Steele, who has a big preview book that a lot of people read. One of the college football Bibles. I read it every year, along with Pick Six previews, a few great ones that to really check out. But Cole Kublik over there on the McElroy and Kublik show, and Cole, former SEC guy player, and he covers the SEC. He says that Oklahoma's defensive line is the best one in the conference. He even thinks possibly in the country. That's a testament of Oklahoma's recruiting since Brent Venables has been there. That you're right. That has been an emphasis. They want big boys in the middle because you don't survive in the SEC without those. Perfect example. When Brent Venables was at Clemson, they always had big dudes in the middle. And that's how they were able to knock off Alabama in the national championship, not once, but twice. They had dudes in the middle in the trenches that was going to cause problems. And that's something that Oklahoma did not have. And so he went out. That 2022 class is when you start to see the rig recruiting from a Grayson Halton, having him. Then you go pick up Jaden Jackson as well as a David Stone as recruits. You go to the transfer portal, grab a Dominic Williams to go right there in the middle, a Nigel Smith who's now up to 290, a Marcus Strong who's over 300 pounds. You get a recruit in Trent Wilson who's a true freshman, and he's already over 300. You do everything you need to do to get guys that's going to be the size you need in order to be competitive, and that's what they did. And they also made sure that getting the strength coach, Jerry Schmidt, bringing him back. Schmidt got these guys to that size like he used to do back when Oklahoma's heyday in the early 2000s when Bob Stoops was here. And so you've got them working at not only size, but also speed. You're keeping them consistent and being able to do both. And so then you go into the edges. You know, R. Mason Thomas was a player that came in. He's 250 now, but he was like 215 pounds when he came in. But he had this ridiculous bend as a 3-star that honestly, Iowa State was almost going to win him. That's who Oklahoma was battling for, R. Mason Thomas's services. And when Oklahoma won, a lot of people were like, I mean, we're excited about a dude that, you know, we're battling Iowa State, no offense, but Iowa State plays a 3-3-5 set. And that's not something that's built to be competitive really in the SEC. You want to be a 4-man front, and you want to have big boys. They have more agile guys. Well, R. Mason got up there and he even got you 9 sacks last year, 6 of them in SEC play. So people were like, oh, never mind. I guess this staff does know what they're doing. So you're adding all the pieces that's required to be competitive. That's why, like I said, a lot of people are pointing out Oklahoma's defensive line is one of the top 3 at minimum in the country. And that's all a testament to Brent Venables and his staff, Todd Bates, Miguel Chavis, focusing on big boys that will be competitive in the SEC.
I'm looking at Oklahoma's schedule headed into this year. We just had the AP poll drop, and Oklahoma's going to be playing 7 teams that are in the preseason top 25. Obviously, with Michigan out of conference, and then you also, too, on top of those 7 teams, you got Auburn in conference, you got Missouri in conference, and I know those are both schools that think they should probably be in the top 25, and hopefully throughout the season they think that they should be competing for a playoff spot eventually. So we talked about just improvements of this team from last year to this year. Is there a concern at all that, hey, maybe we actually do improve the offense a little bit. Maybe we do improve the offensive line, the receivers, but maybe it doesn't get us to where we want to go just simply because you're just playing just this insanely tough schedule?
Let's put it this way. Oklahoma won 6 games with literally no offense. The offense was so incompetent last season. It finished in the hundreds. The bottom 20%, the bottom 10% of college football was awful. Like it was god awful. And so because of that, they still won 6 games. Like, how do you win games? You won 2 SEC games against one team that only lost 3 games all season. They beat Georgia, and then you beat Auburn and on the road at Jordan-Hare. And everybody promises me that place is haunted. And you go in there
Auburn kind of choked that away, though.
Of course they did, because Oklahoma's defense did what they were supposed to do. They pulled out everything they needed to make Hugh Freeze do the one mistake he always does. You got a running back that's running for 5 yards per carry. Instead of handing them the ball, you try to throw it with the quarterback that has had a problem with turnovers. So Oklahoma baited them, did a great job of baiting them, and they won the game. Don't matter how you win, a dub's a dub. But that Alabama game was them literally dominating another team. And so when you go into this year, I totally understand everybody saying, man, you're playing 7 teams in the top 25. Missouri and Auburn will most likely be ranked by the time you see them. Potentially, if Auburn beats Baylor to start the year, you may face 9 teams in the top 25. How are you going to survive? We're playing 2 teams in conference. Actually, now look at the entire schedule. We're playing 2 teams with returning quarterbacks that started last year. 2. That's it.
Hmm.
LSU, Garrett Nussmeier, who should be considered the best one in the conference, and Lenore Sellers, who should be right behind him or battling him for the best quarterbacks. Besides that, everybody else is bringing out new people. We know who Jackson Arnold is, and we know what to do in that game. Texas has Arch Manning. Everybody thinks that he's going to be the savior of Texas football, but their offensive line is still new. They've got a lot. They got a very young offensive line with not a lot of starts together. Got to see if they can get things figured out. Problem for them is they got Ohio State first week, and they just lost the right tackle to injury in camp. So as long as they can hold up against Ohio State, we'll see what Arch looks like. But that game's getting tougher and tougher because of dealing with those injuries. Michigan will be starting a true freshman quarterback. I promise you, Brent Venables love facing a true freshman quarterback. By the time we get to Auburn, there's a chance that there will be a true freshman quarterback or Jackson Arnold figured things out. But either situation, I think Oklahoma will be prepared for that. But then you go down the schedule. Ole Miss has a new quarterback. Austin Simmons looks good in the couple of games he's played, but no starting experience. Tennessee lost their starting quarterback to UCLA. Brought another dude, and now everybody's got questions. The message boards are losing their mind about Tennessee. They think they're going to win go 4-8. Alabama just named Ty Simpson as their starting quarterback. I think he's actually a good quarterback, former 5-star. So I don't know what that's going to look like, but their roster is really good overall. So I think they were the second highest in the blue chip ratio over at 247. They put out the top 16 teams in the country that can actually win a national championship. Luckily, Oklahoma was ranked number 9 on that because we have a bunch of blue chips that people don't realize. They try to say that Oklahoma doesn't have anything, but I digress. Missouri has Bo Prabula as well as I think it's Horn as the other quarterback that they're trying to figure out. And it's a battle. They're battling for actual starting position. So, they've got a quarterback battle going on. We'll see who ends up being the starter. And then LSU had Garrett Nussmeier. So, if anything, and their offensive line they lost some guys to the NFL draft. So, we'll see what their offensive line looks like by the end of the season. My whole point behind all of that, 2 quarterbacks that we actually know. Last year, I think we saw 7 starting quarterbacks last season that were returning starters for those teams. So yeah, last year the schedule is tough. When you go back and look at it, Tulane had Darian Mensah, which actually he was a true freshman, so he was actually new to the game. But Houston had a new quarterback. Tennessee had Nico Iamaleava, who was his first year starting. So that was the first time. Auburn had Thorne, who was a returning starter. Texas had Quinn Ewers, who was a returning starter. South Carolina, new quarterback, Lenore Sellers. We learned about him. Ole Miss had Jackson Dart, who was a returning starter. Missouri they actually had Drew Pine had to come in because who used to start in the Big Ten, but because they lost Brady Cook. But Alabama had Jalen Milroe, who was a returning starter, and Garrett Nussmeier in his first year. So it kind of flips. But the good thing for Oklahoma is that it was not too bad.
That's a good way to look at it is, even though you look at a lot of these teams and you could look at their rosters and you can look at, the blue chip ratio, there is still a lot of question marks with a lot of these teams with a lot of different quarterbacks. And the one thing that you can bet on with Oklahoma is that the quarterback has worked with the offensive coordinator for multiple years, even though you're in a different part of the country now. That's still something you should definitely bank on. I want to ask one more question, then we'll finally get out of here. I'm looking at this schedule. We just talked about it. You just ran through just did a great breakdown of the schedule of this year's and last year's season. Other than, let's say the Texas game, what do you think is going to be the toughest matchup for Oklahoma this season?
Yeah, rivalry-wise, is always a tough game. So you got to always throw Texas in there, regardless of how good either team is. So that game I always tell people is a toss-up, regardless of how, like I said, how good either team is. Toughest game to me is Alabama and Tuscaloosa. That's going to be a really tough game. Alabama has a lot of talent, and having a first-time starter that has probably played he'll probably have played 9 games by the time you get to that game. So he's going to have a lot of good starts under his belt in preparation. The only problem for him is LSU comes to town the week before, and their defense
Ooh.
should be a heck of a lot better than it was last year, especially with Harold Perkins coming back healthy. That defensive line, the interior will be 10 times better than it was last year. I promise you that. Dominic McKinley is one recruit that I love. Wanted him in Oklahoma. But he ended up there, and he's going to be really good. That interior is going to be very, very solid at LSU. So for Alabama, that's going to be a tough game to play against LSU and then have a physical Oklahoma come the next week. So it's going to be intriguing to see how that goes, especially because Oklahoma is going to be coming off a bye week. That's kind of the saving grace for the Sooners. They'll go to Tennessee, play in Knoxville. They'll have a bye week, and then they'll go to Alabama, go out to Tuscaloosa. And for Alabama, they'll play LSU and then Oklahoma, back-to-back physical games. That's going to be tough. Another game, though, is going to be that South Carolina game, which Oklahoma will play them right after playing a physical game against Texas. And that's on the road. That one, to me, is going to be very tough as well. Oklahoma may be able to bounce back from last year, but it's going to be a struggle, man. That game is going to definitely be a struggle bus game.
Yeah, South Carolina last year they were just always in like the craziest games of the year. Like they had a crazy game against LSU, they had a crazy game against Ole Miss, if I remember correctly. The Clemson game was obviously really crazy. Even if you go to their bowl game against Illinois, like it should the Alabama game was absolutely crazy. So yeah, this is going to be just a very tough schedule for Oklahoma this year, but it's also going to be very fun because you're going to be seeing a lot of really good teams, just every single week, which it maybe is a blessing in disguise. Jay, we're running out of time here. Do you want to tell us where we can find all of your work, and then we'll head out of here?
Yeah, definitely. Check us out over on Locked On Sooners here on YouTube, as well as whatever podcasts are download and listen to. You can check out my personal channel as well, Unfair Sports, where I'm talking OU football, SEC, and college football in general as well. I appreciate you having me, James.
Absolutely. Make sure you check them out. Thank you very much for watching. Make sure you hit like, leave a comment, subscribe, check out other content. We've been doing a bunch of different football previews with this. We did LSU a few weeks ago. I know you guys don't play Texas A&M. We did them a few weeks ago. We got a few others planning, coming up in the next few weeks before the season. So make sure you check out that stuff if you're interested. And thank you for watching. We'll talk to you next time.